Welcome everyone to today's Space Syntax Lab seminar. This is the last event for this term, and I'm really looking forward to welcome Dr. Ilgi Toprak. She will be talking about redlining persistence in US cities, segregation through the lens of urban configuration. Ilgi holds a PhD in architecture from the Istanbul Technical University in Turkey. Her research is interested in social inequality, spatial segregation, and gentrification patterns with a particular focus on racial and ethnic diversity. Her research addresses critical issues such as systemic racism, displacement, and other forms of exclusion in cities in the US and Turkey. She's using various methods like urban data analytics, statistics, and space syntax. And currently, Ilgi lives in Washington, D.C. and is pursuing a certificate of applied urban science and informatics at the NYU CUSP Center for Urban Science and Progress. And before we start, if you have any questions during the talk, please put them in the chat so we can address them at the very end. And with this, I'd like to hand over to you, Ilgi.
Thank you so much, Kimon, and thanks for having me here for today's talk. I am very glad to be here and being able to share my research that I have also presented at the 13th Space Syntax Symposium, an earlier version of this, only concentrating on 3 cities. I hope you are able to see my full screen.
Yes.
With my presentation. So if that's the case, we can start working on it. So first of all, I would like to mention that we have a real segregation problem in America that started from like centuries ago. As this sentence from Martin Luther King Jr. inspired me to start this talk, that there's 2 Americas, not one, but every city ends up being 2 cities rather than one. And this dualism is present in so many aspects of like spatial aspects of cities, cultural, and it used to be a black and white issue. But now it's even more than that, but the legacy of it is still there, and you can feel it especially we feel in spaces, in places, as spatial researchers. So this picture is from the Detroit 8-mile wall that I will show in my later slides. But first, let me start with the first problem, the racial restrictive covenants. That is the basis of redlining starting point. The racial restrictive covenants, they appeared in the late 1800s and they spread rapidly throughout the 1900s. These were like agreements between buyers and sellers for properties, and that they were not able to sell or rent or lease to minorities, but especially Black residents, but also any non-Caucasians, including Jews or other like Hispanics, other people than whites. So one might think that this alone might be the cause of the segregation problem, and it's a de facto problem. People didn't want to live with others. But that is not the case, because we find out that in the past history of the United States, there is a concept called redlining, and it is a segregation problem. Like, quoting Rothschild here, it is the product of a publicly stated systematic government policy in every metropolitan area in the United States, and its consequences endure today. It is called redlining for a reason, because these colored maps were used. The homeowners loan corporation made these maps to, and these dates from like the 1930s. So it changed in general how people invest in homes. It supported homeowners. It was supposed to help homeowners to pay their mortgages, but it contributed to segregation as well. But by assessing property values, to lower the risk of these white residents as lender. So they created these maps with a color code, and green signifying the best, the safest areas, and red signifying the most hazardous areas. And when a neighborhood was reported as red, even if it's in it's middle class, like single family home neighborhood, if it was inhabited by the African Americans. So it in fact went too far from its initial purpose. It contributed to segregation. So another thing that happened during this era is, due to redlining, there was something called blockbusting. Blockbusting, it became a way for African Americans who couldn't invest in properties in white areas and who were restricted in the red areas to obtain mortgage for higher than the regular price, and conditions of living was really hard. So these borderline neighborhoods that were like the yellow, for example, became strategic places to buy and sell properties to Blacks. Then purchasing houses from panicked whites who were thinking that, oh, my neighborhood is deteriorating because there are more Black people coming in. So the scenario was, it resulted in the overcrowding of neighborhoods and schools, and like neglected maintenance of the houses that were owned or rented by the Blacks. And here you can see an alley housing from DC, or a South Side neighborhood from Chicago. The conditions that they lived in were pretty disastrous as well. And also the Fair Housing Act came in the 70s, and it outlawed the legal discrimination. But this conditions in the metropolitan centers, where the majority of African Americans were still located, it continued to have this deterioration effects in the city centers, and poverty was restricted to a small number of closely packed and isolated places due to segregation. And these African Americans were pushed into high density urban housing projects. Later on, we can see the redlined cities around the US, which is, this study is very well done study by University of Richmond, about redlining, and it's you can visit this address and you can see how much of the United States were affected by redlining policies. Cities are mostly concentrated on the Northeast and the Midwest, but it's all over the US basically. And later on, we can see also there are some books and useful a link here that you can go into and find out about the structural racism explainer by the Urban Institute, but also other books. These three books, Color of Law, American Apartheid, and Segregation by Design, are dedicated to the subject, and Segregation and Mapping Society by Lauderbon have some dedicated chapters to it. So if you are curious about the issue, you can go check these books. So we are, as we continue, I'd like to give more information about the cities that I'm going to look into. So we have 15 cities. I know that's a lot, but we're going to divide it in 3 sections. And in the first section, as you can see, there are some small central areas with redlining and went through urban growth later on. So these 4 cities, Charlotte, Houston, Louisville, and Nashville. And then we will go into the second one, which is Atlanta, Indianapolis, Kansas City, and Richmond. And these are like a part of the city is redlined, but other areas that are not specified as well. So these 2 parts will be analyzed more into like find out more about the racial divide and the other factors that contribute to the persistence of segregation. So it will be an exploratory study. And later on, I will look into where like examples where the whole city is redlined. And there will be a regression model that assesses the main factors associated with it. And then I will also talk about my ongoing study in Boston. So in the first phase, I would like to talk about the racial divide and the racial segregation in cases of urban sprawl. So we are seeing more like different concentrations of different groups in neighborhoods. Like, for example, we can talk about white affluent neighborhoods in the example of Houston, because we can see these a bit remote neighborhoods that are, you know, like a bit more white concentration. And we can also see that white and African-American groups are quite mutually exclusive when it comes to the concentration of spaces. And there are also some ethnic clusters like Asian and Latino neighborhoods that are scattered in some places. So we can talk about color line in a city called Charlotte in North Carolina. So as you can see in the center of the map, we have the red part, the red lined part, and the green part. So as you can see, the green part grew, like expanded into a white space here. And the red part expanded into a black space here. So there's still the color line, which is like, which is like this arc here. So there is an urban fringe, but we question it. Is it inclusive or exclusive? In this case, this seems quite exclusive. So there is also the overlap of American and Latino populations. As we can see in Louisville example here, because these are more like this happens because of income inequality and ethnic divides as well. Because Latino populations are generally more vulnerable populations in the United States, and this is no more a black-white issue from this point as well. So, and lastly, I want to mention about gentrification, which is a big problem today because there was the exodus out of city movement back in the middle of the last century. But now there's the return of young families, professionals to the inside of the city and the center of the city. And there are more white in previously redlined areas in the Nashville example here, which is probably a clue that this area here has gentrified. And a major consequence is that Blacks have been pushed to the urban fringe, or even more, like in remote neighborhoods, because they're not able to afford in their neighborhoods, which was gentrified. So that leads to Black displacement, but also Latino displacement as well. Sometimes Asian displacement too. In the phase 2, we are exploring what I call the vicious circles. The vicious circles are like, they're both the causes and the consequences of segregation. It's like wicked problems that would kind of affect segregation. It will cause segregation. It will, by time, be the consequence of it, and it will even further increase the gap of segregation. So let's find out about those examples. For example, income is a vicious circle. That's we can see, for example, here the median income of people who are residing now in previously redlined areas have significantly lower median income than other census tracts in Atlanta, example. This also affects other areas like unemployment patterns, poverty patterns are very much in relation to older redlining patterns and persist. That's it's a clue that redlining still persists today. We also can look at urban amenities and street quality example in Indianapolis, for example. Significantly lower in previously redlined areas, for example, here, not so much in the city center, but the street quality and the quality of the sidewalk rating analysis here. So we can see that we can have other examples like health amenities and schools. Schools is a very vicious circle because, for example, you have the school rating. A school is a good school, for example, because it's in a wealthy neighborhood, it's in a whiter neighborhood, and then people want to when they're raising their kids, they want him or her to attend that school, so they are moving to those neighborhoods. So there are more segregation because of the school segregation as well. The schools are still segregated in that sense. And also food, access to food. Better grocery stores are in neighborhoods with more wealthy people and whites in general. So that's another fact. And also we have Kansas City here, the home ownership rate, for example, still among the lowest in previously redlined areas, and more in places that in remote places mostly, but not in the city center so much. And previously redlined areas have the lowest, some of the lowest home ownership rates. Also, housing quality can drop, the home values and the homelessness issues can arise. We can also finally look at the green space issue. This is an example. This is not my map, by the way. The only map that I didn't produce is from the Richmond site. And previously redlined areas, let's please look that there are the least green spaces here in the red areas. Also, I looked at other studies and made a study about the urban heat vulnerability in DC, for example. And also, there are in most vulnerable places in terms of redlining that still have the highest heat vulnerability, the worst air quality, and so on. The examples can go farther than that. So we have finally our regression model with the 7 cities that I'm going to talk about here. And the segregation from the lens of urban configuration, which was the title of my study here. First of all, so I'm going to look at independent variables and the dependent variable here, which independent variables, as you know, are the potential causes, and the dependent variable is the potential effect. It's the effect. So I'm going to try to build that model with the example of Pittsburgh. As you can see, we have the historical segregation patterns, the redlining patterns from the past that are reflected onto the census tracts, and I used here a tool, a geoprocessing, a summarizing geoprocessing tool in ArcGIS Pro. It's called Summarize Within. That's how I did it, and it's the reflection of the previous. Maybe you can see the difference a little bit. So later on, I go to the street network integration, the closeness centrality patterns. This is the only one space syntax analysis that I will use, because in fact I realized that the choice is, because it's a true moment, it doesn't really make sense. I started doing that as well, but true movement is mostly concentrating on areas, like it has a gathering potential. So that was what here is analyzed, normalized, and angular integration in values with different metrics, like 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer, and 5 kilometers that have been assigned to do this analysis. And later on, I did the same thing, and I reflected it onto the census tracts, which it may seem a little interesting, because I use the mean values, and that I am very aware of, that it reduces the granularity of the analysis, but also like aggregating this data allows me to include this this data into my model. Because all of these racial composition attributes are available on census tract level, which is a problem, the US data system. So we have this aggregated data of different racial compositions that we can analyze. And then home ownership rate, it speaks for itself. I don't have to explain it. And later on, the dependent variable. What does all this causes contribute to? Well, it contributes to the segregation index, right? It's either segregating or integrating. So I choose a segregation index here, which it is a multi-group assessment. Chose a multi-group assessment because I wanted to see an overall segregation value for each census tract, if it's more diverse or if it's less diverse, without differentiating different racial composition, because it is included in the model. So what we can see is, so it's not like two groups or one group. For example, exposure is about two groups, how they affect each other, or isolation is just about one group and how it relates to all other groups. This is a multi-group thing. I use Spatial segregation module to analyze this, to compute all of these. And alternatively, there's another measure called local entropy, tails H, giving pretty much similar results with this. So I built this model for all of the 7 cities. Well, Baltimore made me a little sad, so I'm not going to present it, but the other cities are here available. So Detroit, we can talk about Detroit. I will just mention 2 things, 1 or 2 things about each city because we have limited time left. A majority Black city here, and Latino neighborhood not so configurationally integrated to the rest of the city, but we can see that a part of the local diversity is matching with our normalized integration of 1 kilometer, which is the center of the city. Later on, we can talk about Cleveland, and Cleveland is like, please look at the composition here. The composition tells us that there is a color line here, right? Composition of African American and white almost divided in the center like this. And we have a very well configurationally integrated African American area, and still an African American area here, and previously as well. But here, probably the waterfront, we can see the waterfront here, is a little bit gentrifying, it seems, because there is the infusion of white and Asian in this area. So, and it's very well integrated. So we can see a little bit about gentrification and configurational integration correlation, positive correlation in this example. So not all in all of the examples, of course, but every city tells a different story. In Chicago, we can see a good configurational integration in 5 kilometer in normalized integration, and we can see a local diversity in the same area, local diversity increase in the same area, which tells a lot. This correlation that you're going to find out in our regression analysis as well, but this is worth mentioning. Later on, Philadelphia also very much concentrated here. The configurationally integrated areas are mostly the most diverse places as well. But we can see that there is, again, a divide. The African American area, which is here, not so well integrated. And the white area, again, not so well integrated. The Hispanic area is the most integrated here, which is the central area of the city and the most diverse area as well. I'm going to talk about correlation tables here, and we have three examples that we're going to talk about, but I'm going to show you the values as I go. So first of all, the local diversity is has the local diversity, which was our dependent variable, has a very positive correlation with the composition of agents all the time. Like here, it's like 0.5, 0.5, a good positive correlation, but not that much, quite positive with Latinos. So we have here a good correlation, not so well, but you know, it's not as well correlated with Asian composition, but it has some pattern. Cities have strong negative correlation between local diversity and composition of African Americans, which is something very interesting. For example, look at here in Chicago, minus 0.63 is a strong negative correlation here, which means in these cities, African Americans are segregated. They're not included in the local diverse areas. But in some other cities, there are not so much. Here, yes, but here, no. In Pittsburgh. So another important finding is the mutual exclusion of Black and white, and this is very prominent in many cities, like minus 0.96, minus 0.74, minus 0.83 is a lot of negative negatively correlated findings here, correlations. So that is saying that African American and white does not really come together in census tracts. Local diversity is also positively correlated to configurational integration in some cities. For example, we can find out that this city has positive correlations. These cities not so much, but Pittsburgh has a great correlation with both 1 kilometer and 5 kilometer normalized integration. And redlining doesn't seem to correlate with local diversity, but negatively correlates with normalized integration, configurational integration, which means that most previously redlined, like hazardous, as places as that were shown as red in the maps and the whole maps, are places that are most configurationally integrated, which makes sense because that's the most like city centers and where Blacks were very abundant in the past. So it makes some sense to me. Now let's talk about this regression analysis. I'm not going to talk about it too much in detail, but tell some things. So we have our dependent variable, which is local diversity, and a number of the other contributors. And we almost always see that Asian presence is statistically significant. Sometimes, by the way, this is 99% with 2 stars is 99% and 95% with 1 star. So you can judge for yourself and read. So we can see that Pittsburgh Latino and Boston Latino local diversity is positively affecting our regression analysis. And looking at redlining maps, we have either Detroit and Philadelphia, who are significant in contributing to local diversity. But one is negatively, one is positively. contributing. So there are some things that we should look into the maths and really try to understand. So it's not really significant, to be honest. And angular integration here, normalized and angular integration, that was in fact the reason why I started the study. The most interesting finding is that Boston has the 1 kilometer integration having a negative effect on the local diversity, meaning that we have the most diverse, the diversity increases when the 1 kilometer normalized angular integration decreases, or vice versa. So it has a negative contribution. And again, we have the strongest R2 value in Cleveland, and all of the others are like in the middle. So, but I am eager to work on more cities and more contributors, more regressors, so we can find out more about what these cities tell us. Lastly, we have next steps. Next steps, it will be Boston, because Boston was really interesting to me in terms of finding out about the negative effects of normalized angular integration on local diversity. So I will use this. This study is still ongoing, so I'm going to just show you the path that I will use. I will increase the independent variables. So I will put more independent variables, like we have historical segregation, redlining patterns. Already we have integration values already. We're gonna maybe increase the metric values here. Try with the choice, and then go on with the racial composition, as I had in this model as well, home ownership rate again. And then we go to economic regressors, like median income, median home value, educational attainment, like people went to high school or university or graduate school, according to census tracts. A green spaces issue, urban tree canopy, which is likely to increase in white areas in the US most of the time. And housing types like condos, single family. We can also talk about like the density of housing, like how dense. We can maybe work on zoning criteria, and that might contribute to how we perceive spaces, because single family houses have big yards sometimes, and it also tells that urban tree canopy is probably higher there. So also very much seeing all of these patterns are strongly correlating to each other. Like there are not, these are the causes and these are the consequences, and there's not a single way of looking at it, but it's more like an exploration. So maybe as a dependent variable in the study, I will again use local diversity and local entropy as well to see the patterns, but I'm also quite interested in doing a study where I'm not gonna make my mind about it and start with regression analysis. We know everything, and everything is going to contribute to local diversity, but no, I'm more like a clustering approach maybe, but we don't know what contributes to what other things, and we find out patterns. That could be interesting. That is something that I'm looking forward to. I thank you for the time and listening to me. If you have questions, I am glad to answer it. And if you wanna write an email to me about my study, here's my email.